once lived in a small town in England, in a poor family where every single penny mattered. His father was sick and couldn't work. His mother cleaned houses just to feed the family once a day. Jack was only 8 years old when he first held a kettle in his hands and walked out to sell tea on the roadside. Every morning before school and every evening after school, Jack stood by the street corner with a small wooden table and a few paper cups. He would shout, "Tea! Fresh tea!" with all the energy he had. Some people would buy from him, some would walk away, and some would laugh at him. But Jack never stopped. He didn't wear nice clothes, he didn't have good shoes, and he never had money to buy toys like other children. But there was something powerful in him, a fire that never went out. His hands were small, but his dreams were huge. Every night, after selling tea, he would sit under a streetlight and open his schoolbooks. Sometimes, his hands were shaking because of the cold. Sometimes, his stomach was empty. But his mind was full of hope. He wanted to learn, he wanted to study, and he wanted to grow. He didn't want to remain poor forever. He didn't want to stay small. He wanted to become someone big. Many people laughed at him. "You sell tea, Jack. How will you ever succeed?" they said. But Jack only smiled. Because deep down, he believed in himself. He believed that life was not about where you start, but where you reach. One rainy evening, something happened that changed his life forever. A man in a black coat came to his tea stall. He looked tired but gentle. He ordered tea and then noticed Jack's books lying next to the kettle. "You study here?" the man asked. Jack nodded and said, "Yes, sir, I do my homework here." The man asked him what he wanted to be. Jack looked straight into his eyes and said, "I want to be a CEO." The man didn't laugh. Instead, he smiled and gave Jack a small card. "This is a free app," he said. "You can learn computer coding here. Try it. It may change your life." That night, Jack borrowed an old phone from a kind neighbor. The screen was cracked, and the battery didn't last long. But it was enough to start learning. And that's when Jack's real journey began. Every night, after selling tea, he learned. He sat on the cold floor, connected to slow internet, and watched free lessons on coding. He didn't understand much at first, but he didn't quit. He repeated the videos. He wrote down notes. He practiced daily. His eyes burned, but his dream burned brighter. Slowly, he started building small programs. Then websites. Then tiny mobile games. It took months of hard work, sleepless nights, and hundreds of failures. But Jack never gave up. By the age of 15, Jack was doing small freelance jobs online. He earned a few dollars and used them to buy a better phone. Then a second-hand laptop. He left the tea stall behind and focused fully on learning. No more customers, no more hot kettles. Now, he was building his future with code. People in his town started noticing the change. The same people who once laughed now said, "Jack, can you help us build a website?" Jack smiled, but he didn't forget their words. At 17, he built an app that helped school students prepare for exams. It became popular in his area, and then across the country. Teachers used it. Parents shared it. Students loved it. That one app changed everything. He was still a teenager, but now, he was a founder. A leader. A boss. Jack officially registered his tech startup and called it Bright Future Technologies. It was the name he had written in his diary years ago, when he sat under the streetlight and dreamed. By 18, he had 5 employees. By 20, he had 30. He moved to London. He opened an office. He wore clean suits now. He gave speeches at events. But in his heart, he was still that small tea seller with big dreams. He didn't forget. On the wall behind his CEO chair, there was an old photo, a young Jack, holding a kettle, smiling. A reminder of where he came from. People asked him, "Jack, how did you do it?" He always gave the same answer, "I never stopped believing." He said, when you have nothing, you only have one choice: to rise. And rise he did. From the dusty street corner to the tall buildings of London. From a tea seller to a tech founder. From a poor child to a rich, respected, and powerful man. His story was published in newspapers. He was invited to interviews, podcasts, and university stages. But Jack didn't become proud. He became more humble. He opened free learning centers in poor areas. He gave laptops to children who couldn't afford them. He created a scholarship for kids who dreamed big like him. He visited schools and told them, don't be ashamed of poverty. Use it as power. Jack became a hero. Not just for his town, but for the entire country. Even the Prime Minister invited him to speak about youth empowerment. Jack stood on the big stage, looked at the audience, and said loudly, if a chaiwala like me can become a CEO, then you can too. All you need is faith, focus, and fire in your heart. His voice shook the hall. People stood and clapped. Tears rolled down his mother's face. She remembered the small boy who walked with the kettle in the cold. Now he walked with confidence, carrying dreams in both hands. Jack's journey is not just a success story. It is a story of struggle. A story of self-belief. A story that tells us that you don't need money to start. You need courage. You need discipline. You need to believe that your future can be different. No matter where you are born, what clothes you wear, or what job you do, you can rise. He didn't come from a rich family. He didn't go to a fancy school. He didn't have a mentor or guide. But he had something more powerful: hunger. Not just hunger for food, but hunger to grow. Hunger to prove himself. Hunger to turn his pain into purpose. And that hunger made him unstoppable. Even today, Jack visits his old town every year. He walks past the same street where he once sold tea. Sometimes he buys tea from a small boy standing there and gives him a little extra, along with some advice. Keep learning, he tells him. One day, this tea stall will be your first office. Jack's success didn't just bring money and fame. It brought responsibility. He realized that many kids in the world were just like him, full of dreams but stuck in poverty. They had talent. They had passion. But they didn't have tools. Jack decided he would be the one to change that. He started a project called T2 Tech, a free training program for poor children. It taught them how to use computers, how to write code, how to speak in public, how to think like a leader. Thousands of children joined. Some from India. Some from Africa. Some even from refugee camps. I was once just like you, Jack would tell them. Don't wait for someone to save you. Become your own hero. And these kids believed him because his life was the proof. Many rich businessmen donated money to his cause. Big companies offered partnerships. But Jack never let money change him. He stayed real. He stayed humble. He still lived a simple life. No big cars. No luxury watches. Just a small house, a laptop, and a heart full of purpose. One day, a journalist asked him, Jack, what's your biggest achievement? Jack didn't talk about awards. He didn't talk about money. He smiled and said, my biggest achievement is that my little sister never had to sell tea like I did. Those words made the world cry. People realized that Jack didn't build an empire for himself, he built it for his family, for children like him, for the world. Years later, Jack was invited to a global summit on education. Leaders from all over the world were there. Presidents, CEOs, ministers. Jack walked up to the stage, wearing his simple white shirt and black pants. He looked at the crowd and said, when I was 10 years old, I sold tea to buy my dad's medicine. I studied under streetlights. I ate one meal a day. But I never let my circumstances decide my future. Poverty is loud. It screams in your face. But your silent determination must be louder. Never let your tears drown your dreams. Let them water your passion. The hall went silent. Some had tears in their eyes. Some clapped. Some stood up in respect. Jack was no longer just a former chaiwala. He was a symbol of hope. He was a voice for the silent dreamers. He was the fire that couldn't be put out. Today, there is a statue in Norwich, near the place where Jack once sold tea. It shows a small boy holding a kettle in one hand and a laptop in the other. Below it, a plaque reads, "To the boy who brewed dreams and poured out greatness." And every year on that day, children from all over the country gather around that statue. They bring their own stories, their own struggles. And they say, if Jack could do it, then so can we. Even though Jack is now one of the most successful young CEOs in the world, he still starts his day with a cup of tea. Not because he needs it, but because it reminds him of where he came from. Never forget your roots. Never forget your struggle. And never, ever forget your power. Jack's company Bright Future Technologies became a global name. Schools across the world started using the learning apps created by his team. The company wasn't just making money, it was making an impact. Children from villages, towns, and refugee camps were learning from their phones, gaining skills, and building new futures. Jack received awards from different countries for innovation, for youth leadership, for social impact. But he never cared much for the trophies. He kept most of them in a cupboard. The real trophies, he would say, are the smiles on the faces of those kids who thought they were worthless until they saw their worth through my story. One winter, Jack returned to Norwich quietly. No media, no cameras, no staff. He walked the same roads he used to run barefoot as a child. He stood at the exact corner where he had sold tea for 10 years. The shop owner recognized him and hugged him with tears. "You made us all proud, Jack," he said, voice shaking. "We used to think you were just a kid with a kettle. But you had a mind sharper than a blade." Jack smiled. He bought tea just like old times and sat on the pavement. People walked past, confused. Why would a millionaire sit on the ground? But that ground was his foundation. Those streets were his roots. And he never wanted to forget them. He took a small notebook from his pocket, the same one he used as a child. On the first page, written in his 10-year-old handwriting, were the words, "One day, I will be a boss." He looked at those words and whispered to himself, "You did it, Jack. You really did it." Jack later opened a university, free for poor kids. The name? The Hustle School. Its motto: fail, fall, fight, then fly. The students there came from every kind of background: beggars, orphans, laborers' children. But inside those classrooms, they were all equal. No rich, no poor. No weak, no strong. Just learners. Just dreamers. Just future changemakers. Jack would visit often, not as a CEO, but as a mentor, sitting on the floor with the students, sharing stories, checking code, listening to their ideas. One day, a girl in the class raised her hand and asked, "Sir, were you ever scared?" Jack paused. He looked around at the faces of hundreds of kids who were looking up to him like he was a superhero. Then he said, "Yes. I was scared every single day. I was scared of failing. I was scared of being laughed at. I was scared I'd always be poor. But I never let that fear win. I fought back. And that's why I'm here." Bravery isn't about never being afraid. Bravery is about taking one step forward even when you're shaking inside. The students clapped, some cried, some held their heads high, because in that moment, they saw their own story in Jack. Jack's journey didn't just stop with his country. He was invited to the United Nations to speak on youth and innovation. People from over 100 countries listened as he stood on that world stage and told them, "I never went to university. I never had a fancy degree. But I had a dream that burned like fire. And I turned that fire into a future." The world doesn't need perfect people. It needs real people. People who hustle. People who help. people who rise. And then lift others up too. The audience gave him a standing ovation. He was not just a success story anymore. He was a movement. A symbol of courage, hustle, and hope. And what about Jack's family? His mother never had to work again. She now managed a charity for poor mothers. His sister became a software engineer, trained in his own company. His father, though no longer alive, had his photo in every room of Jack's house. Jack would often say, "Every cup of tea I sold paid for a brick in my castle. My father taught me honesty, and my mother taught me strength. That's all I ever needed." The world kept changing. Technology evolved. New generations rose. But Jack remained the same, grounded, grateful, and giving. Every time he spoke at an event or appeared in public, he carried one object with him. Not a laptop. Not a trophy. Not a company logo. A simple, old, rusted kettle. And whenever someone asked, "Why do you carry this?" he would answer, with a smile and tears. "This kettle carried my past. It carried my struggles. It carried my dreams. And today, it reminds me that even the heaviest burdens can lead to the greatest heights." So if you're struggling today, if you're poor, rejected, unheard, if you're working hard and nobody sees it, if your dreams feel too far, remember Jack. Remember that a tea seller became a CEO. Remember that a little boy with burnt fingers built a digital empire. Remember that your pain can become your power. You may not be rich today. You may not have fancy clothes, or a good phone, or even a quiet place to study. People may look down on you. They may laugh at your dreams. You may even feel like giving up. But remember this: your current situation is not your final destination. Jack started with nothing, just a kettle and a dream. He had no shortcut. No rich family. No lucky break. But he had determination. He had hunger. He had heart. And that was enough. So if you are grinding in silence right now, if you are hustling while the world ignores you, if your heart is tired but still hoping, then listen closely. You can win. Not because someone will give you a chance, but because you will create your own chance. Keep learning. Keep pushing. Keep going. And one day, just like Jack, the world will not only know your name, it will celebrate your story.